Hello, I'm Jay, and this is Relax with Jay. I create calming videos that allow you to relax and or drift off to sleep. If you enjoy my videos and find them helpful, please hit the like button, subscribe, and click on the notification bell. I hope you enjoyed this video and may it bring you restful sleep. Tonight, I'll be reading the third part of the story called The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. If you enjoyed this part and would like me to read more, please let me know. As the enraptured Archibald fancied all this, and as he rolled his great green eyes over the fat meadow land, the rich field of wheat, of rye, of buckwheat, and Indian corn, the orchard burdened with ruddy fruits, and surrounded the warm tenant of Ventussel, his heart yearned after the damsel who was to inherit these domains, and his imagination expanded with the idea how they might be readily turned into cash, and the money invested in immense tracts of wild land and shingled palaces in the wilderness. Nay, his busy fancy already realized his hopes, and presented to him the blooming Caterina, with a whole family of children mounted on the top of the wagon, loaded with his household trumpery, with pots and kettles dangling beneath, and he behaved himself bestriding a pacing mare, with a colt at her heel, setting out for Kentucky, Tennessee, oh, the Lord knows where. When he entered the house, the conquest of his heart was complete. It was one of those spacious farmhouses, with high, rigid, but low-sloping roofs, built in the style handed down from the first Dutch settlers, the low projecting eaves forming a piazza along the front, capable of being closed up in bad weather. Under this were hung flails, harnesses, various utensils of husbandry, and yet of fishing in the neighboring river. Benches were built along the sides for summer use, and a great spinning wheel at one end and a churn at the other showed the various uses to which this important porch might be devoted. From the piazza, the wandering Archibald entered the hall, which formed the center of the mansion, and the palace of usual residence. Here rows of resplendent powder, ranged on a long dresser, dazzled his eyes. In one corner stood a huge bag of wool, and ready to sprung. In another, a quantity of linsey woolsey, just from the loom, ears of Indian corn, and strings of dried apples and peaches hung in gay feston along the walls, mingled with the god of red peppers, and a door left ajar gave him a peep into the best parlor, which the claw-footed chair and the dark monogamy tables shone like mirrors undrawn, with their accompanying shovels and tongues glistened from their coverts of asparagus tops. Mock oranges and clown shells decorated the mantelpiece. Strings of various colored birds' eggs were suspended above it. A great ostrich egg was hung from the center of the room, and a corner cupboard, knowingly left open, displayed immense treasures of old silver and well-mended china. From the moment Archibald laid his eyes upon this region of delight, the peace of his mind was at an end, and his only study was how to gain the affections of the peerless daughter of Ventussel. In this enterprise, however, he had more real difficulties than generally fell to the lot of a knight-errant of yore, who seldom had anything but giants, enchanters, fairy dragons, and such like easily conquered adversaries to contend with, and had to make his way merely through gates of iron and brass and walls of adamant to the castle keep, where the lady of his heart was confined, all which he achieved as easily as a man would carve his way to the center of a Christmas pie, and then the lady give him her hand as a matter of choice. Archibald, on the contrary, had to win his way to the heart of the country coquette, beset with a labyrinth of whims and caprice, which were forever presenting new difficulties and impediments, and he had to encounter a host of fearful adversaries of real flesh and blood, the numerous rustic admirers who beset every portal to blood, and her heart keep a wishful and angry eye upon each other, but ready to fly out in the common cause against any new competitor. Among these, the most formidable was a barely roaring, rustering blade, the name of Abraham, or according to Dutch abbreviation, Bram van Brant, the hero of the country run, which rang with his feats of strength and hardihood. He was broad-shouldered and double-jointed, with short curly black hair, and a bluff but not unpleasant countenance, having mingled air of fun and arrogance. From his curling frame and his great powers of limb, he had received the nickname of Brawn Bones, which he was universally known. He was famed for great knowledge and skill in horsemanship, being as dexterous on horseback as a Tartar. He was foremost at all races and cockfights, and with the ascendancy which bodily strength always acquires in rustic life, was the umpire in all disputes, deciding his hat on one side, and giving his decision with an air and tone that admitted of no gaiety or appeal. He was always ready for either a fight or for a frolic, but had more mischief than ill will in his composition, and with all his overbearing roughness, there was a strong dash of waggishness, good humor at bottom. He had 3 or 4 boon companions who regarded him as their role model, and at the head of whom he succored the country, attending every scene of feud or meriting of for miles bound. In cold weather, he was distinguished by a fur cap surmounted with a flirting fox's tail, and when the folk of the country gathering described the well-known chest at a distance, whisking about among a quad of hard riders, they always stood by for a squirrel. Sometimes his crew would be heard dashing along past the farmhouses at midnight with a whoop and halloo like the troop of Don Cossets, and the old dames, settled out in their sleep, would listen for a moment till the hurry-scurry that clattered by, and then exclaimed, "Ay, there goes Broom Bones and his gang." The neighbors looked upon him with a mixture of awe, admiration, and goodwill, and when any madcap prank or rustic brawl occurred in the vicinity, always shook their heads and warranted Brown Bones was at the bottom of it. This rumple hero had for some time singled out the blooming Katerina for the object of his uncouth gallantries, and though he amorously toying with sometime like the gallantole, carriedness and endowment of a bear, yet it was whispered that she did not altogether discourage his hopes. Certain it is, his advances were signalled for rival candidates to retire, who felt no inclination to cross a line in his armor, insomuch that when his horse was tied to Van Tassel Powling on a Sunday night, a sure sign that his master was courting, or as it is termed, spanking. And within all those suitors passed by in despair and carried the war in other quarters. Such was the formidable rival with whom Archibald Crane had to contend, and considering all things, a shrewder man had he would have sunk from the competition, and a wiser man would have despaired. He had, however, a happy mixture of probability and perseverance in his nature. He was in form and spirit like a supple jack yearling, but tough, Though he bent, he never broke, and though he bowed beneath the slightest pressure, yet, the moment it was away, jerk, he was as erect and carried his head as high as ever. To have taken the field openly against his rival would have been madness, for he was not a man to be throttled in his armor any more than that stormy lover Achilles. Archibald, therefore, made his advances in a quiet and gentle, insinuating manner. Under cover of his character of a singing master, he made frequent visits at the farmhouse. Not that he had anything to apprehend from the meddlesome interference of parents, which is so often a stumbling block in the path of lovers. Bald Ventoso was an easy, indulgent soul. He loved his daughter better than his pipe, and like a reasonable man and an excellent father, let her have her way in everything. His notable little wife, too, had enough to do to attend to her housekeeping and manage her poultry, for, as she sagely observed, ducks and geese are foolish things and must be looked after, but girls can take care of themselves. Thus, while the busy dame bustled about the house or plied her spinning towel and wheel at one end of the plaza, honest Balt would sit smoking his evening pipe at the other, watching the achievements of a little wooden warrior who, armed with a sword in each hand, was most valiantly fighting the wind on the pinnacle of the barn. In the meantime, Archibald would carry on his suit with the daughter by the side of the spring under the great elm, or stuttering along in the twilight, that hour so favorable to the lover's eloquence. I profess not to know how women's hearts are wooed and won. To me they have always mattered to ridden and admiration. Some seem to have one vulnerable point, or doors of success, while others have 1,000 avenues and may be captured in 1,000 different ways. It is a great triumph of skill to gain the former, but a still greater proof of generalship to maintain possession of the latter. For men are most to battle for his fortress at every door and window. He who wins 1,000 common hearts is therefore entitled to some renown, but he who keeps undisputed sway over the heart of a coquette is indeed a hero. Certain it is, this was not the case with the redoubtable Bonbones, and for the moment Archibald Crane made his advances, the interest of the former evidently declined. His horse was no longer seen tied to the paling on Sunday nights, and dreadfully feud generally arose between him and the precolor of Sleepy Hollow. Broom, who had a degree of rough chivalry in his nature, would fain have carried matters to open warfare, and have settled the proposition to the lady, according to the mode of those who most concise the simple reasoners, the knights errant of the yore, by single combat. But Archibald was too conscious of the superior might of his adversary to enter the list against him. He had overheard a boast of Bones that he would double the schoolmaster up and lay him on the shelf of his own schoolhouse, and he was too wary to give him an opportunity. There was something extremely provoking in this obscenely pacific system. It left Broom no alternative but to draw upon the funds of rustic waggery in his disposition, and to play off boorish practical jokes upon his rival. Archibald became the object of whimsical persecution to Bones and his gang of rough riders. They hurried his hitherto peaceful domains, smoked out his singing school by stumbling up the chimney, broke into the schoolhouse at night in spite of its formidable fastening of width and window stakes, and turned everything topsy-turvy, so that the poor schoolmaster began to think all the witches in the country had held their meetings there. But there was still more annoying. Broom took all opportunities of turning him into ridicule in presence of his mistress, and had a scoundrel dog whom he taught to whine in the most ludicrous manner, and introduced as a rival of Archibald's to instruct her in Polos Nordi.